I was arranging my mother's phone apps when I saw it. Nothing dramatic, just Elaine's trembling fingers handing me the device across a pale yellow kitchen, the same kitchen from my childhood, where the sun hits the counter in exactly the same way at 4 in the afternoon, where the air still smells like her Earl Grey and the vanilla she burns in those ceramic holders she collects. "The new bank thing," Ishi said, settling into her chair. "Your father won't help. Says it's woman's work now, which makes no sense." I'd heard this complaint in 100 variations. My father, Richard, had constructed a mythology around his own incompetence, as if navigating digital systems was a feminine skill, or perhaps just a young person's skill, which somehow excluded him despite his 6 to 7 years of being alive in a world increasingly run by screens. It was easier to perform helplessness than to learn. It was easier still to have a daughter who would learn for him. I unlocked Elaine's phone with the date she always chose for her passwords, Margaret's birthday. My grandmother, dead now for 4 years. Dead in the way people become symbolic rather than present. The banking app was straightforward. I'd built a system for my parents years ago, one of those quiet infrastructures of care I'd learned not to resent. I walked through the steps with the precision I reserved for my actual job, the one that paid me $84,000 a year, moving money, reconciling accounts, translating the language of modern finance into terms my mother could absorb while she watched me work, humming that small, satisfied hum that meant she felt secure again. Protected. Held by my competence. That's when I noticed the folder. Not new, just in plain sight, a family chat or inner circle. I didn't click it. Not then. Elaine was right there, reaching for her tea. I held the phone level so she could confirm the transfers were complete, and she made that sound again, relief-given voice, and thanked me with a kind of intensity usually reserved for major surgeries performed without anesthesia. But I'd seen it. I knew where it was. And I knew, in the way you know something before you consciously know it, that I was not supposed to. I got home to my apartment at 7 o'clock. Downtown Raleigh, 16th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows I'd chosen specifically for the northern light. Minimal furniture because I wanted the space to feel like a gallery for what I actually paid attention to, my photography equipment, arranged on the wall-mounted shelving like instruments in an operating theatre. The Nikon. The Pentax. The collection of lenses I'd bought slowly over 15 years, each one purchased with money my family didn't know I was spending, each one a small rebellion against the role I'd inherited. I opened my laptop. I didn't go to my emails or my work files. I went to Elaine's cloud storage, the account I'd set up for her, that I'd migrated to when she switched to a new phone, that I paid $15 a month for without complaint because the alternative was listening to her panic about lost photographs. The family documents were there. Not hidden, just organized. In a folder labeled E Estate and Finances, E with a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. Margaret's will. The trust documents. The bank statements showing an inheritance of $340,000 that had been liquidated and divided. Not divided equally. Divided according to what my mother, as executor, had deemed appropriate. Vanessa had received $98,000. Lily had received $78,000. My father had received $85,000 as Margaret's son-in-law. I had received nothing. The logic was documented in a spreadsheet, a separate sheet titled A Distribution Rationale, which showed my mother's thinking in real time. Categories like a financial status, a life circumstances, a need assessment. I was placed in a category of my own, a financial stability and independence. Below this, a single note, EN has strong income and secure position. Distribution would be redundant. The group chat was easier to find. Elaine had screenshots of her phone's messages saved to the same cloud folder, organized chronically, as if she'd known one day I might look. Vanessa. I think Mom's right. Natalie is doing fine. She doesn't really need anything from us. Elaine. Exactly. She has everything she needs. Besides, she's never asked for anything, never needed our help. I think she'd be uncomfortable being treated like Lily or your father. Lily. So she's too competent to inherit? That's so messed up. Vanessa. It's not punishment. It's pragmatism. Why give her money she doesn't need? Richard. In a separate thread, is Natalie going to know about this? Should someone tell her? Seems dishonest. Elaine. I've decided not to mention it. She's never asked. And honestly, she'd make it complicated, have feelings about it. This way everyone moves forward. This way, everyone moves forward. I sat on my sofa, a piece of furniture I'd chosen for its clean lines and its absolute lack of ornamentation, and read that sentence again and again, the way you examine a photograph you've taken, looking for what it reveals about the photographer. This way, everyone moves forward. What she meant was, this way, no one has to acknowledge the decision. No one has to defend it to me. No one has to watch me process what it meant. My emotional reaction, my hurt, my questions, these were obstacles to their preferred narrative, which was one where the estate had been divided, and I was fine with it because I didn't know about it, and what you don't know can't hurt you, and besides, I was doing so well, I was so self-sufficient, I needed nothing from them. Except, of course, I did things for them. All the time. Constantly. Invisibly. I opened a document on my computer. I didn't frame it as revenge, not even in my own mind. I framed it as data collection. As inventory. I was, after all, a financial analyst. I knew how to measure value. 21 years of tax preparation, estimated 180 hours of work. At my current billable rate of $225 per hour, that was $40,500 in unpaid labor. 15 years of technical support, password resets, software installations, account troubleshooting, app tutorials. My estimate, conservative, 250 hours, $56,250. 8 years as the family's informal financial advisor, helping my sisters with credit cards, explaining retirement accounts, sitting with my parents during their annual insurance reviews. 100 hours minimum, $22,500. 3 years of actively managing my parents' financial accounts, from estate planning to bill pay coordination. 200 hours, $45,000. The photography that was never taken seriously, the exhibitions I didn't pursue, the clients I didn't chase because I was always available for the family infrastructure I maintained, this was harder to quantify. I didn't try. Just the documented work came to $164,250. I saved the spreadsheet in a folder labeled Personal Records. I didn't tell anyone I'd made it. I didn't need to. Not yet. But I started paying attention differently. The next time my father called with a technology question, something about his browser being a weird, I walked him through it instead of doing it remotely. It took 42 minutes for what I could have fixed in 4. The next time my mother texted about a banking form, I sent her the instructions instead of filling it out myself. She asked twice if I could just do it, her voice in the text carrying that particular register of disappointment, as if I developed a sudden disability. I wasn't being cruel. I was being transparent about the labor. I was letting them see the work that had always been invisible. Within 2 weeks, my family's communication shifted. Fewer requests for help. Fewer calls. The silence was oddly peaceful. It was also, I realize now, the exact moment where I could have chosen differently. Where I could have called a meeting, had a conversation, advocated for inclusion in the estate while there was still time to reframe it as an oversight. where I could have been the reliable daughter who points out the mistake and solves the problem. I didn't make that choice. Instead, I called a lawyer. Her name was Claire Thorne, and I knew her from the professional network I belonged to, one of those circles where women in finance and law occasionally overlapped at conferences and dinners. She had a reputation for being thoughtful about family law without being theatrical about it. I appreciated that. I made an appointment. Her office was modern and impersonal, designed to be forgettable so that people could focus on the actual work of disentanglement. I brought copies of everything: the will, the trust documents, the estate distribution, the communications, my spreadsheet of unpaid labor, though I positioned it as the information I wanted to organize and not as evidence. Your mother, as executor, had discretion in how to distribute a discretionary estate, Claire said, not unkindly, adjusting her glasses. That's actually fairly standard. She wasn't obligated to divide it equally among grandchildren and spouses. I understand that, I said. What I wanted to know is whether that discretion was exercised fairly, and whether there's any legal recourse if it wasn't. Fairly is a philosophical question, not a legal one. Claire leaned back. What matters legally is whether there was fraud, undue influence, or breach of fiduciary duty. From what you've shown me, it looks like your mother made a decision based on her own judgment about need. That's not illegal. What if I'd been directly promised a share and then excluded? Then you'd have grounds. But you weren't promised anything, were you? No, I said. I was just assumed to not need it. Claire was quiet for a moment. You know what strikes me about this conversation? You're not actually asking me to sue. You're not asking me to challenge the distribution. You're asking me to confirm that it's legal, which tells me you already knew it was, and what you really want is permission to do something else. I looked at her. She looked back at me with the patience of someone who'd spent 15 years watching people negotiate with themselves. I want to know what my options are, I said, if we're protecting myself if this situation escalates. Escalates how? I'm about to set a boundary with my family. I'm about to stop providing unpaid labor. I anticipate they'll react poorly. I want to make sure that if they retaliate, I have documentation and a legal framework. Claire nodded slowly. Document everything going forward. Save all communications. If they threaten you, defame you, or harass you, document that specifically. But I'd also recommend a cease and desist letter, a formal communication that you're withdrawing from providing unpaid services and establishing boundaries around shared accounts and access to your personal information. Would that seem aggressive? Would it be accurate? Yes, I said. Then it's not aggressive. It's honest. The people who react badly to honesty are usually people who benefit from dishonesty. She pushed a pad across her desk. Want to draft the letter now? I did. It took 2 hours, and it read like the most polite demolition I'd ever written. I specified dates by which my parents would need to migrate to their own accounts. I detailed the services I would no longer be providing. I established a policy for future requests, payment at my standard consulting rate, or polite decline. I was not angry in the letter. I was just clear. Clarity, I was learning, was far more powerful than anger. I sent it on a Friday, to arrive the following Monday via certified mail. I also emailed digital copies to Elaine, Richard, and Vanessa. I didn't send it to Lily. She was mostly just financially chaotic, not complicit in the exclusion, though her existence had certainly been used to justify it. Then I waited. The first response came from my father, via phone, at 7 in the morning on Monday. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. And Natalie, what is this letter? Your mother is very upset. Can we talk about this like a family? We could not talk about it like a family, because a family would have included me in the decision being made about me. But I didn't say this. I didn't answer the call. I let the silence speak. The second response came from Vanessa, a text that managed to be concerned and furious simultaneously. A mom just showed me your letter. This is really harsh. We know the estate thing might have felt unfair, but this is not how you address family issues. I read this 3 times. Might have felt unfair. As if it was a perception I'd chosen, like an allergy to a particular fabric. As if fairness was subjective when money was involved, except, of course, fairness was apparently very objective when the money was being handed to them. I didn't respond to Vanessa either. I discussed this with Claire, who was very clear. The moment you engage with the justifications, you've entered a negotiation. Silence was not hostility. It was a boundary. By Tuesday, the phone calls had escalated. My mother left a message in a voice so wounded I could hear her practice the hurt. And Natalie, please. I know you're upset about Margaret's estate, but I made what I thought was the right decision for everyone. You don't charge your family for help. That's not who you are. This landed differently. This was the core of the manipulation, stated plainly, her definition of who I was. Reliable. Generous. Capable. Someone who didn't ask for reciprocity because the privilege of being useful was supposed to be reward enough. I recorded the message. Claire had advised me to do this, nothing illegal in recording a voicemail, and I provided documentation of her acknowledging the estate and framing the boundary setting as unusual behavior for me. By Wednesday, there was activity on social media. Vanessa had posted a photograph from some family event years ago, all of us smiling, all of us performing the mythology of togetherness, with a caption about how important family was and how sad it was when people forgot where they came from. No names, but context was clear to anyone in our family or mutual circles. That same evening, Lily sent me a text. Hey, I just wanted to check in. Mom and Dad are really upset, and I'm honestly confused about what's happening. Are you okay? This was the one person I could actually talk to, or at least the one person worth being honest with. I called her. What happened? She asked, picking up immediately. I asked the family to stop treating me like an unpaid administrative service, I said. And I documented the fact that they excluded me from grandmother Margaret's estate without telling me. Silence. Then, oh my God. They didn't tell you about the estate? No. I found out by accident. Did you know? Not that they excluded you, no. I knew they were dividing it, but I didn't know you weren't. I mean, I assumed. Lily trailed off. This is really bad, isn't it? It's informative, I said. It's clarified a lot of things about how I'm viewed in this family. Lily made a small sound, something between a laugh and a cry. You know what's insane? You're literally the only one of us who has any financial stability, and they excluded you because you don't need money. Like, the logic is that you're too competent, so you don't deserve family help. That's actually insane. That was my assessment as well, I said. They're going to try to make this about you being ungrateful or something, aren't they? Almost certainly. That sucks, Lily said. For what it's worth, I think you're right. I think what they did was shitty, and I think you deserve an apology, and I think their response to you setting boundaries is going to make it worse. But I'm not going to pretend you're being unreasonable, because you're not. This was, unexpectedly, a small kindness. Not an alliance, exactly, but a refusal to participate in the gaslighting. I noted it. I would remember it. Thursday morning, my mother showed up at my apartment building. I was at work, I'd made sure to be at work, visible in the office, documented as present, but she somehow obtained the building access code and left a note taped to my door. It was written in her careful handwriting, the same script she'd used on my childhood birthday cards. Natalie, we need to talk. I don't understand why you're being this way. Your father is hurt. Vanessa is disappointed. I'm frightened that I've done something to damage our relationship. Please call me. We love you. Mom. I photographed it and sent it to Claire with a caption. Is she got building access somehow? This is escalating. Claire's response was immediate. Save that. Don't communicate with her directly. I'm going to send a more formal cease and desist from my firm. They need to understand this is being tracked. The legal letter, when it arrived at my parents' house, had the desired effect. Not because it was threatening, it wasn't, but because it made the conflict concrete and external. They couldn't pretend anymore that this was just a family disagreement that could be smoothed over with time and the application of guilt. This was now a thing with a lawyer and documentation and rules. The phone calls stopped. The social media posts stopped. But the silence was worse, somehow. The silence suggested a recalibration happening behind closed doors. The silence suggested they were determining what leverage they possessed and how to deploy it. I would find out soon enough. It started with my employer. Richard called the main line at Foster & Associates, my consulting firm, and asked to speak to my supervisor. I don't know exactly what he said, it was filtered through HR protocols, but the message was clear. He was questioning my stability, my judgment, my recent behavioral changes, and he was doing it from a position of apparent concern. Poor, confused, farther worried about his daughter. Just checking in. My supervisor, Margaret, different Margaret, one I actually liked, called me into her office with the awkward energy of someone who'd been put in an uncomfortable position. Your father called, she said, and I felt a small shock. This was brazen, even for them. He's concerned about you. About what specifically? I asked. He didn't get into details. Just mentioned that you've been going through something, and he wanted to make sure you were okay, that if you needed time off or support, the firm could help. This was sophisticated. He was planting seeds of doubt about my mental health, my reliability, while positioning himself as a concerned family member. He was leveraging my professional reputation by suggesting I might need accommodation. I'm fine, I said. I'm having a family conflict regarding finances and boundaries. I'm working with a lawyer to resolve it. But I'm fully capable of doing my job. Okay, Margaret said. I had to ask. But for what it's worth, I believe you. And just so you know, your work has been excellent. If anything, you seem more focused lately than you have in a while. I thanked her and left, documenting the conversation in an email to Claire before the day ended. By this point, I'd hired an actual private investigator, a small step that felt disproportionate until I realized that documentation at scale, surveillance of behavior, the gathering of evidence, this was what protected you when you were fighting someone who had legitimate access to you. Parents have a kind of permanent claim on your attention. You can't completely avoid them without burning something down. So instead, I made the architecture of that avoidance crystal clear. Every interaction was documented, every claim was verified, every escalation was recorded. The PI was thorough. She found that my father had called 2 of my clients, professional contacts I'd worked with on consulting projects, and asked about my stability and work quality. He'd framed it, again, as a concerned father making casual conversation. The clients hadn't said anything to me, but they'd been confused by the calls, and now that I knew what was happening, I called them myself and explained the situation clearly. I didn't frame it as a my father is trying to hurt me. I framed it as I am setting boundaries with my family, and they're responding by questioning my professional standing. I wanted you to hear from me that I'm fine and this is a family conflict with no bearing on my work. This took the air out of whatever narrative my father had been attempting to construct. Instead of me being a worried concern, I became someone managing a difficult family situation with transparency and professionalism. 6 weeks in, my mother asked to meet. Not at the house. At a restaurant, a neutral location, someplace public. I almost declined. But Claire advised me to meet, to hear what they were offering, to use it to gather more information about what they were thinking. We sat in a quiet booth at a restaurant called The Harvest, which served elevated farm-to-table food and billed itself as your place for important conversations. The irony of this wasn't lost on me. Elaine ordered soup she didn't eat. I ordered coffee and sat with my hands visible, my posture open, my expression neutral, the kind of calm that comes from being documented, from knowing you're in the right, from understanding that whatever happened in the next hour would be on your terms. I want to apologize, Elaine began, and I watched her construct the words carefully. For not telling you about the estate. That was wrong. Your father and I have discussed it, and we think we made a mistake. Okay, I said. We'd like to make it right. Your father wants to give you his share from the inheritance. And I'm going to add some money, $50,000, to make your portion more equitable. I didn't say anything. I let her sit in the silence. We also want to revisit the letter you sent. We think the terms are too harsh. Your father isn't equipped to handle his own technology, and your mother. I sent a letter, I said, that specified payment rates for services or a formal decline of services. That's not harsh. That's professional. But your family. Yes, I said. And I'm also someone with a job and a life and limited time. The letter explains how to access those things respectfully. Elaine's face did that thing it did when she realized she wasn't going to get what she wanted through cajolery. It hardened, slightly. You know, Natalie, sometimes I wonder if you've ever actually needed anything from us. Even as a child, you seemed to manage on your own. I have to say, it's almost refreshing to see you ask for something for once, even if it's framed as a rejection. This was the moment. This was where she was telling me the truth about how she'd always understood me, as a problem that solved itself, as a daughter who didn't require the usual parental investment because she was competent enough to do without. I didn't come here to ask for something, I said. I came here because you asked to meet. If you want to discuss the inheritance, I'm listening. But the boundaries I've set aren't negotiable. Even the part about not helping with technology? Especially that, I said. Because helping with technology was love, until I realized it was just me being useful. And I'd rather have no relationship with you based on honesty than a relationship with you based on my availability. Elaine's eyes watered. She didn't cry, she was too controlled for that, but tears formed and then seemed to recede as she pulled herself back together. I don't know how to have a relationship with you that doesn't involve me asking you for help. That's the problem we need to solve, I said. The meeting ended without resolution. She gave me the check her lawyer had drawn up, $132,000, my father's share plus Elaine's offered amount, as if money could smooth over the fact that I'd never been fully seen, fully included, fully loved except in the moments when I was useful. I didn't refuse it. Claire had advised me not to. Take it, as she'd said. This is you reclaiming resources that were supposed to be yours. This is rebalancing. Don't make it symbolic by refusing. Make it practical. Make it real. I deposited it into a separate account and didn't touch it for a month. In the meantime, I did something I'd been planning for years. I gave notice at my job. This was the part that felt most radical. The most secure part of my life, the part that had defined me as financially independent and professionally competent, and I was walking away from it. Not because of the family conflict, though the family conflict had clarified something I'd been avoiding. I was working 60 hours a week at a job that paid me very well to be exactly what my family had always wanted me to be. Reliable. Competent. Infinitely available. A person who solved problems instead of having needs. I had $280,000 saved. I had the inheritance. I had finally, after 15 years of maintaining other people's infrastructure, decided to build something for myself. I'd been taking photographs for years. Portfolio-level photography. Work that would have impressed galleries if I'd ever bothered to submit it. The equipment in my apartment represented hundreds of hours of research and careful curation. But I'd never treated it as anything but a hobby, because hobbies fit around the edges of real life, and real life was the job, the family, the architecture of being useful. Now I was making it the real life. I found a space in downtown Raleigh, a former printing studio with northern light and exposed brick and square footage that could be divided between workspace and gallery. The landlord was a woman named Patricia who'd run a bookstore downstairs until her retirement, and who understood about the dream of running something that was entirely yours. She gave me a 3-month trial lease at a rate that was almost, but not quite, too good to be true. I spent 2 months building out the space, learning business lore, creating a website, researching permits and insurance. I reached out to photographers I'd met over the years, people I'd been too busy to develop real friendships with, but who knew my work and respected it. I started taking commissions. I opened a waiting list and filled it in 3 weeks. When I sent the announcement email to my professional network, I included my family in the CC line. Not because I expected celebration. Because I wanted them to know that I was building something, and it would not include them. They would no longer have access to me in the way they'd grown accustomed to. They could watch from the outside, but they couldn't participate. They couldn't profit from my competence. They couldn't call me when they needed something fixed. The infrastructure I'd maintained was dismantled. They were going to have to figure out passwords and banking apps on their own, or pay someone to do it, or leave that part of their lives unsolved. There was a pettiness to this I didn't quite feel good about, but I also didn't try to transcend it. I'd earned the right to a little pettiness. My father's response was a short email. I don't understand why you're throwing away your career. This seems like a reaction, not a choice. It was a reaction. But it was also a choice. The two things could be true simultaneously. My mother didn't respond to the announcement. Instead, she sent me a text a week later. I saw your new business online. It looks beautiful. I'm proud of you, even if I don't understand it. I hope we can find a way forward that doesn't feel like you've had to give things up. I read this several times. It was, in its own way, the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. She was acknowledging that my reclamation of myself looked like loss from her perspective. She was proud, but she was also grieving the version of me that had been infinitely available. And she was hoping, still hoping, that I could choose them without sacrificing myself. I responded, finally, with something true. I've given something up. But it was something I should have refused a long time ago. I don't regret it. I'm not sure about reconciliation yet, but I'm open to connection that doesn't require me to be useful. It was not an invitation. It was a statement of possibility, the smallest possible opening. She didn't respond. By my first month in the studio, I was booked through December. I'd hired an assistant, a young woman named Claire, different Claire, though the coincidence felt significant, who was working toward her own photography degree and who reminded me of myself at that age, competent but underestimated, useful but not yet powerful. During a slow afternoon in November, she asked me about the portfolio on the wall. Images I'd taken over the years, some of them 15 years old, all of them technically excellent and emotionally restrained. Landscape mostly. Architecture. Light and shadow. One of them was from inside my family's house, the kitchen where my mother sat, though she wasn't in the frame. Just the space, the light, the feeling of it. "You're really good," Eclair said. "How did you not do this before?" "I was good at other things," I said. "And I was needed. And I confused being needed with being valued. So I stayed in the thing I was good at, even when it was hollowing me out." Is that the plan now? Not be needed? "The plan now is to be chosen," I said, "rather than required. And to choose back, very carefully, only the things and people that deserve that choice." She nodded as if this made sense. Maybe to her generation it did. Maybe they'd grown up in a world where this was obvious. You don't stay in structures that diminish you just because you're good at maintaining them. You don't wait until you're in your 30s to start living a life that's actually yours. Over the following months, I did occasionally see my family. Not as a group, but in ones and twos. Lily came to the studio opening and got genuinely excited about the work. She asked smart questions about pricing and marketing, and she didn't ask me for money, which felt like growth for her. My father came once, on an afternoon when I was working with a client, and he looked uncomfortable and lost in a space that was entirely mine. He didn't ask for help with his phone. He actually just looked at the photographs. My mother came in the spring. It was a Saturday morning, and I was photographing a couple for their engagement session, so she stood quietly in the corner and didn't interfere. When I finished with the clients, she was still there, looking at a series of architectural images I'd taken around Raleigh, buildings and light, the infrastructure of the city. "You see things," she said finally. "The way you frame things. You've always seen things differently than other people." "I knew how to photograph," I said. "I just didn't know how to value it." "I'm sorry," she said. And I could hear that it was genuine. The first genuine apology that didn't come with conditions or justifications. "I'm sorry for teaching you that being useful was the only way to be loved." I didn't hug her. I didn't absolve her. But I didn't reject her either. I just stood there with her in my studio, in the space that was entirely mine, and I let her see what I'd built. "Can we have dinner sometime?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "I'd like to think about what that would look like first." She nodded and didn't push. When she left, she didn't ask me to fix her phone, and I didn't offer to. The silence between these things felt like healing, or at least like the possibility of it. A year after I'd found that group chat, I stood in my studio in the afternoon light, preparing for a gallery show of my own work. The images were good. I knew they were good. I didn't need anyone's approval to know it anymore, which was different from before. Before, I'd needed external validation to feel valuable. Now I validated myself. It was a small thing, but it changed everything. Vanessa had reached out recently, something about a family gathering for my father's birthday. I'd declined, and she'd accepted the decline without argument. She was in therapy now, working on her own stuff, trying to understand where the moral superiority came from. I didn't need to understand her process. I just needed to maintain my boundary, and I was good at that. I was good at a lot of things, actually. I was just finally doing them for myself. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Lily's friend, someone I'd met briefly at a coffee shop, asking about me doing photography for her daughter's graduation. I took the commission. Then I took 3 more, all of them referrals from people who weren't family. This was the thing I hadn't expected. that reclaiming yourself from one broken relationship opened up space for new connections to form. That boundaries weren't walls, they were doors that opened the right way. I stood in my studio as the light shifted from afternoon to early evening, that golden hour where shadows and illumination reached their perfect proportion. I raised my camera to my eye, and I photographed the way the light fell across the empty white wall, the way darkness and brightness existed in the same space without erasing each other. This was what freedom looked like. Not triumph. Not vindication. Not even peace. Exactly. But the quiet knowledge that you belonged to yourself, and you were enough.